as I'm talking about it. Boom. Well, what's up, everybody? Sam Callahan here with the Callahan Training Group podcast, back with another episode here with Rob Epifania. We were going to discuss some VR stuff today, some fancy new style training. All this new technology stuff pops up, and we have a lot of questions pop up. So if you guys haven't heard of Rob before or seen Rob before, I've had him on a previous episode, so you probably are familiar with him. But Rob, go ahead, say what's up, man.
What's up, guys? Just about to share the revolutionary training system.
Yeah, it's funny because we were discussing just before we started recording here. One of the bane of my existence is, "Hey Sam, what gear is the best, and what this and what's that?" And it's always a question. And now VR just got added to the list. It's like, "Hey, what's the best gun? What's the best dot? What's the best holster? Should I buy that VR thing?" And I got enough questions that I figured it warrants a talk about it. Now, Rob beat me to the punch. Rob was messing with this thing long before I was. Tim Herron was messing with it long before I was. There's some guys with 500,000 rounds through the system already. So I am technically late to the punch here. But Rob has figured out a way to use it. Now that I've started using it as a serious training tool, that's where we really want to start talking about why you would buy it, why you would purchase it, why I think it's a positive addition to anybody's training arsenal, we'll call it. So Rob, when did you buy the thing initially? When did you get started with it?
So I started with it. So I had seen, Matt Little and Tim Herron, like those guys are people that I know that I talk to, good people, believable people too, in terms of, like they're good shooters. So Matt was the first one to adopt it, and then Tim adopted it because Matt was doing it, and then I saw Tim playing around with it, and it's like you could see he's using it, and I'm like, well, I normally don't recommend any training thing unless it keeps you training when you normally wouldn't. Because like a lot of the gimmicks are they don't beat your gun with your sights and your trigger, making connections between target, what you saw when you press the trigger.
Yeah,
So
I think that was a big hesitancy for a lot of us
yeah.
instructors. Where we've all been preaching, I don't want third party dependency. I don't
Mhm.
want Mantis, or I don't want these things out there for me to I think I did the right thing. Did I do the right thing? I want you to be really confident in Dryfire, but if you're really confident in Dryfire, you still don't have accountability. So there had
Right.
to be a bridge to gap, and I think it was interesting to see. I agree.
So I picked it up. It was around May of last year, and I started using it casually. So by casually, I mean twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. I'd play, and I liked playing it, so I played until I was done. It was usually about 45 minutes to an hour, a good session. I started with a Quest 2. I upgraded to a Quest 3 recently. And we should talk about the differences for
Yes.
anybody asking that question too at some point.
Yes.
Um, After the season was over, I started using a bit more in end of November, December, and I started noticing stuff. I actually went a little bit without live firing, except for like teaching classes and lessons, a couple weeks. And I noticed I was shooting better. And it was like, well, that's interesting. Like I haven't really shot much, and I'm much more aware of what's going on. So I was like, let me continue the experiment. Like you talk about the lab for you.
Yes.
Let me continue this experiment. So I went mostly the month of December, and up until this point with largely using Ace as my training tool 6 days a week. I took a couple weeks off even in January for just a scheduled break, reset,
Little handbrake, little brain
hands,
break. I get it. Yeah.
redo that. I also was trying to make a running goal, so I made 109 miles in January.
Oh,
So,
cool. Hell, that's a lot of
which
running.
never in my life, even when I
That's
had two functional feet.
an
Um,
insane amount of running.
it's yeah,
That's good
six
if
days a
you
week.
cycle. That's a good bike number. Fucking 100 miles.
So
Yeah, damn.
yeah, so I'm still using started using it again, picked right back up from where I actually the first day I started off with a better first run than I had ever done on like my series, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's the experiment is largely working well. So I'm going to continue it, and as it gets warm, I'll start to add a lot of live fire training back into it 3 times a week, something
Yep.
like that. And we'll see how it continues as we go. But I'm super super happy with the system, and I would definitely recommend, as would you,
Yeah.
when you picked it up.
Because
So
it's funny, I had the same weird experience. Like I bought it because I finally gave in and I wanted to play with it. And play with it was the way I phrased it. I didn't mean
mhm,
it in a negative way, but I was like, hey man, I dry fire, I live fire. If I could do something extra and it's fun, and like I'm not a video game guy. I haven't had a video game console since like the Xbox 360. So I
mhm.
was like, hey man, like there's a Batman game on it. My buddy, I have a buddy who plays mini golf, and I think there's a game like a gun game on there. And he's not a gun guy, but he's like, you're a gun guy, Sam. If you want to come play with me, we'll hose people. So I'm like, all right. Like, I was walking through Target one day. Meta was on like an insane sale, and because you're like a Target, my wife and we have a baby. And if you have a wife and a baby, you are a Target's rewards member, whether you know it or not. Um, I had like a $75 off and 20% back. I got an insane deal to get the meta. So I was like, all right, screw it. It's like $150 to get a meta. It's no loss. It's fun, for lack of better terms. The Ace system, well, I run a training company. I could write it off and like justify a purchase. You know what I mean?
Me
Like,
too.
but I was like, all right, cool. It's no harm, no foul. I have one other tool I can get better with, and I did the same thing as you. I just started playing around with it twice a week, 3 times a week, and it was fun. I'd play with it until I was sick of it. Like my face
Yep.
was bored and sweaty. But I didn't have the FCU or the gun initially. I downloaded the thing, I put my pin in, and I was shooting with just a controller. And just in that, what went from kind of fun turned into, wow, this is actually training. And I started to realize, like, I'd set a PR one day, I'd come back the next day, set a PR again. Like, how the hell is that even possible?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not improving my gun handling skills. How is it possible? And then it's the magic of, you realize, well, I'm learning to use my brain, my eyes. I'm achieving like another level of processing speed without even trying. It's just fun. And I was doing that with a literal, just little stupid wand controller at that point. So
Mhm.
that's when I was like, you, I was like, all right, I'm going to experiment. And that's why I think you and I get along a lot is, hey, if I have a theory to test on people, I test it on me. And then
Yeah.
if it works on me, I'm going to start testing it on a bunch of my students. And if it works on them, onward and onward until I could teach a whole class on it. And I did
Exactly.
the same thing. I shut up. I just kind of ran this meta for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks as a part of like a training system. And I came out the other side. I was like, well, I'm not getting slower. I'm only getting faster. I'm only getting
Right.
better. And the
Mhm.
end of that couple of weeks, when I could finally come out and start talking about it publicly, like, as in, not that I could or could not, I'm not on a gag order, but I don't like to talk about things unless I would use them myself. So, like 3, 4 weeks in, I went and I had been shooting pucker factor. I didn't have a gun yet either. I was just shooting pucker factor with the controller. Normal USPSA classifier, low ready start. I did it a bunch of different ways. I clocked what my best way was in the ACE system. I saw what I needed to see. I went out and live fire tested it. And this was in like November, December. So it wasn't even like warm or anything. I wasn't expecting to hit any PRs. It was just like, let's see, let's do some experimentation. So obviously, drawing to the last target, I added a little bit of time from my first shot, but
Yeah.
then all the data from shooting pretty much stuck. I knew what I needed to see. All I did is put my eyes on the pace that I knew what I needed to see. I let the gun follow my eyes. As we all know, it works if you trust it. And
Yeah.
I just shot a GM pucker factor, and I was just sitting there like, no way. Like, no way that just happened. And I was like, all right, so maybe I just like, yeah, I got lucky because I wasn't thinking about it. Let me do it again. Boom.
Yep.
And a couple times in a row, I could consistently, and that's a big part of my preaching is consistency. It taught me how to use my eyes consistently. It taught me what I needed to see consistently. And if I just applied the physical to get to that visual, I got it.
That's it, man. And it brings you along the lines of, for the higher level you go, and if anybody listen to this, Sam will agree. The higher level of shooter you are, the better your fundamentals are, the more recoil becomes visual. It's not as much mechanical anymore because your mechanics are solid. Now it's just, what are you seeing and how long? How do I get myself to the next shot sooner? So Ace does a very good job. So we were just discussing this before too. The recoil and the erraticness of the dot in Ace is worse than it is in live fire. And that's when I started noticing a big difference. Was like, man, my gun in real life does not move around this erratically. And it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like now I can actually shoot faster, and the gun just, it's more predictable, it returns nicely. And that's when I started making that connection that recoil is just visual the higher up you go, and shot calling off of the lift of the dot is something you could do in Ace as well.
Yes.
Plus,
Yeah.
so interesting part of this experiment, right? I barely do, like at this point, I barely do any draws, barely do any reloads anymore. Shh, don't tell anybody, because I'm supposed to be the reload guy, right? But it's, at this point, they're higher value skills to
Yes.
get return of training
Mhm.
investment on. So
And that's
I
like,
didn't
hold
do
on,
any of that.
that is like a journey thing too, where like you are at the point where you have 110% speed built at your draw and your reloads. Like you earned that, so
Yeah.
you'll let that 10% buffer carry you while you get. I just to jump in there. Sorry,
No, it's
I don't
fine,
want
dude.
anybody being like, "Oh fuck reloads, fuck draws."
No.
You did so much work that
Yeah.
you kind of gave yourself a buffer to start working on other skills, and you
Right.
yeah
And that doesn't mean I still can't do them. So this is the interesting part, right? I went out, I went out cold day, whatever, teaching a lesson or whatever. And I was actually teaching Chris. And my draws are still like good.
yeah right there.
And I'm like, how in the hell? Like I wasn't even using my pick draw. I literally wrapped my belt around my big jacket,
Yep.
and you can't pick the gun out of the holster hard that way. So I
Yeah.
just had to do a traditional draw, and I'm still at a 1 second on a 10-yard target.
Hmm.
I'm like, huh. And that like I'm like, well, all the presents. So I don't go from low ready. I go from like a chest presentation with the gun angled down.
Yep.
So it's the same thing as your second part of the draw.
Yep.
So I noticed I was doing that. I do that so much now that and the dot is harder to find, right? In Ace,
Yep.
the dot is harder to find than it is in real life if you have good mechanics, and it's creating faster processing. So now when it's there sooner, I'm able to shoot sooner with more awareness. I'm like, man, that is crazy,
Yep.
crazy stuff.
It's funny because a lot of guys online get bent out of shape about not doing draws and real reloads and all the stuff. And you just said something that to me was very valuable. I realized that I was building a really solid index every
Hmm.
time I was using this. If you start from, I don't want to say a gamey low ready, I'd start from a true 45-degree down low ready, or I like what you said. I do that a lot. Is
I
chest
like the
to chest low
chest.
ready, wherever my draw would my grip would be completed. Right
Yep,
there.
I'm here. I'm here with the muzzle angled down enough that the lady doesn't tell me
Yeah.
to keep the
Yeah, so you
muzzle
don't get
pointed
that voice telling you, "Oh god, that lady is driving me insane." But
She does.
it's interesting because then we look at it. I talk about it as segmented drawing, right? Well, you could work on the pick. You could just work on. I call it the snatch, right? Everybody has a different word for it. Like you could just work on that. That's a really. It's not easy, but it's a very simple thing that you could just get a good grip. Well, if you have a good grip and you have a good index built, I think that's the meat of shooting. Like,
Yeah, it is.
I know that a draw is very important, but it's a very small fraction of the time that you actually spend doing the rest of the things that have a lot more time. Now, if you're going to be a GM, you have to make sure all that other stuff's polished, but that's what you did already. That's what we did. We've spent years traditional
Yeah,
dry firing, basically.
and
Like we,
for anybody who is not, A class, M class GM, like your gun handling needs work probably.
yes,
So if you can't make the minimum standards, at that point you should be getting them the draw and reload to minimum standards. But once they're there, being able to process information faster, being able to transition the gun sooner, being able to move better, those things are going to start to return you more on your
bingo.
investment.
Yes.
Unless you're doing a division like production or something like that, which is what I did,
Obviously, yeah,
where you're doing
revolver
3 or 4
production,
reloads,
things,
like,
yeah,
that's where it makes a difference. The reloads, but even then, the draw, like, if you could put a 1-second draw on a 7-yard target, you don't have to really like, the amount of effort that you're gonna put in to get to point 8 is not as worth it as putting that effort into getting a transition from a
yes,
point 5 to a point 25,
exactly. Yeah,
which is
like at
also
some point,
easier
if
to
that's
do.
your lowest hanging fruit, if all your other shooting's great and you want to get to a point eight, great, awesome, good for you. But I 100% agree. I like one of the things I started to do with my like system was define like what is good enough, and like you could start to say, well, a 1 second draw is good enough, a 1 second reload is good enough, quarter second splits and the transitions to
Quarter-second
match
transitions.
are
Mhm.
good enough, but it has to be easy all the time. So
Yeah.
consistency is more important than like, hey, I'd rather build consistency at good at I don't want to say good enough because that gives the wrong impression, but like
Well,
I want to
a
build
an
consistency
acceptable
at
standard
success
is
rate,
what you're looking
right?
for.
Yeah, I just want to say what is successful. I want to meet that success rate to a high rate of completion without a whole lot of tension, a whole lot of try to it because that leads to
Yep.
inconsistency. And now, yeah, for me, all my meat and potatoes now is the processing. It's the eyes. It's doing that stuff to a high, again, consistency because there's so much more eye work to do. If you forget a transition, if you forget something, it's valuable. There's a lot more meat and potatoes in there. Like there's a lot more points to be scored when you're shooting than there is to be drawing or reloading. I know that sounds obvious when you say it like that, but
Well, not it's not obvious to everybody, which also brings us to, you talk about consistency, right? We talked about wanting to discuss how we're using this system
Yep.
to gain effective training from it, because
Hmm.
there are a lot of people there, and you know, you might know somebody that does this, but all they're doing is chasing leaderboard, right? They're chasing the leaderboard in the hopes of getting lucky one time.
Hmm.
When you use it that way, you get into what I call junk reps. When
Yep.
you're getting junk reps, you're not paying attention to anything. You're really just hoping to get lucky one time,
Hmm.
and you didn't learn anything for that time invested. So it's important that you're able to become aware when you start wanting to go that way, because all of us are competitive. You know, we want to start to go that way. You
Yeah.
have to catch yourself and be able to pull yourself back from it, and train it in a specific way. If you're training to build skill, like you're building skill based on, like what Sam would say, metrics. You're using metrics within the training exercise, the lab, so to speak, to gain that skill. But
Hmm.
we use it a little differently in terms of how we use it. I'll let you explain first how you do it, Sam.
No, so I like it. So that's the big thing. I get the question of like, all right, is it worth it? And yes is the short answer. We just went over like, yeah, I think it's worth it. Second, like, how do you use it? Why is it worth it to you? Why is it not a game? Because there's always that challenge. It's just a game. It's just this. It's just that. And I'm like, yeah, you could treat it like a game. Like I could treat it like you said. I could treat it like a Halo level where I'm trying to speed run it. I'll get lucky one time. Cool, that's awesome. But that's not any skill. Video games aren't skills. What we're trying to do is relate our real skill to this system. And what I started to do personally is I step up and every day there's a daily drill. So what I like to do is come in cold like a match. I didn't know what the daily drill is going to be. I couldn't practice it. I open the daily drill. I look at it. I read the stage brief. I do my normal mental like make ready where I'm like, all right, it's going to be that target, that target, that target, do a little bit of dry fire, and I go for it. And my whole goal is you get 3 reps at the daily drill that count for score for that day before they go to practice reps. I want them, as Rob said, to be consistent. I want to be able to set a high bar and be able to do that 3 times. I don't want to do a easy one, go for broke and go for broke and then screw it all up. I want to make sure consistently I'm shooting at a high percentage, a high consistency, because that's what being a grandmaster is. That's what being a high level shooter is. It's not having huge changes to your performance. It's being consistently at 95%. So if I can just hold my potential. And then that's where I do like the leaderboards in the vein of using them productively, not like Rob was saying correctly. It's stupid to just chase a high hit factor for a day. But if I shoot a 12 hit factor and there's somebody, this is why we're going to go into this, why I like that there's a community now. If I see a guy like Rob shot it in a 15 hit factor, well, I need to figure out what meat am I leaving on the table? Because Rob is not going to lean through a wall and cheat. He's not going to jump the timer.
No.
If I'm shooting a 12 hit factor and he's shooting a 15, I have to figure out, oh, maybe he did this, maybe he started on the left side. And what it leads to me is if I'm going to shoot the stage a couple more times, I'm going to now start experimenting, gathering data, start training. What if I did this instead? So instead of chasing leaderboard stuff, I'm going to start changing up arrays, changing up orders, seeing if I can get another target in before the swinger pops out. You name the thing, but you'll start to see, oh my God, I didn't even know I can get away with that.
Hmm.
And without the leaderboard there to kind of say, stop being complacent, yeah, but if you chase the leaderboards incorrectly, it just becomes a video game again. So we're in this weird place where I'm not worried about being high hit factor on the leaderboard. I'm worried about making sure that I am in there with the rest of the
Yeah,
GM community.
within reason, you
Yes.
know.
And then because I've also done the experimentation the other way, because I'll be totally transparent about it. When I shoot an 11 hit factor or 12 hit factor on a stage and it's all alphas and I couldn't physically do it any harder or faster, sometimes the next hit factor is like if I did a 12, it'll be a
Yeah,
15. So I'm like,
I've
all
seen
right,
it.
how did he cheat the stage? And that's when I'll start being like, oh, he leaned through a wall. I get it. I understand. And I'll cheat back. I want to see it because it's like I want to see all options available. But
Hmm.
it's just for the experimentation phase of like that's
Sure.
why I like this. It's experimenting to see like what else can I do? What else can I get away with? Because at the end of the day, as much as all the data, like Rob said, the visual data is difficult to keep consistent. Like it's very difficult to do that correctly. It's an average shooter's recoil. It's not even a grandmaster recoil, right? It's an average
Yeah,
shooter's recoil. So if you're using all of that, it's building you up. It's building you up
it
mentally as a
is.
shooter. You're gonna build some more consistency, and you're gonna not be able to get away with garbage. Like you're saying, the garbage reps. You're not gonna have a lot of those garbage reps if you do it. Experiment and then like learn. You're not really. I don't really care about my stats in the game. That's the big thing that
Yep.
people get wrapped up around. Like I'm diamond this, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other thing. Like I don't care because I know I'm going to do a bunch of experimentation. I know half of my practice reps are going to be wonky, weird things that I'm working on these two targets. I might not even finish the stage. I might work on just an activator and a couple of targets and just like I would in real life, you know? So I'm not worried about being the best at practice, as Kenny Powers would put it. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to just learn with the system basically. So I like to hear that you use it like that. I know Timmy uses it like that too, where he'll do some experiment. Something that I was just talking about, and I don't know if you've ever done this before, but something I was talking about in my call recently, the Zoom call. I wanted to do a little bit more like free shooting, not wait for the lady, you know what I mean? Not wait for
Uh-huh.
the shooter ready standby. Like I just wanted to gather more data. So I went to the range or ranger, I think they call it,
Yeah.
right? And you could put 5 targets out there. So what I did is put like a smash target, right? Put like a 7-yard open paper target. I put then all the other like a paper at 25, 2 poppers at 20, and then a popper at like 15, or a piece of paper at like 15. But
Mhm.
everything's pretty difficult, right? Other
Yeah.
than that one smash target. And they're all IPSC paper, so you actually have to aim on it. It's not a USPSA paper. And what I ended up doing was running designated target on my own, because you can monitor the timer on this VR thing. You could start it like normal. You could hit B. You could look down and tap through your times. And really what I was looking for was a consistent, this is when I actually will start doing draws, by the way, because I'm not worried about chasing leaderboards. I'm just going
Yeah.
to make sure I
Yeah.
could do a draw to that 20-yard target at 1.4 every single time or under. Again, success, that's my defined metric. And I would do designated target as I normally would do it, because I'm not worried about the score and the time. They have a little board over here that shows you in green where your shots were, and I'll shoot an array just on designated target. And I'll basically go, and instead of going to the range like I normally do and
Mhm.
shooting designated target 25 different ways,
Yeah.
I can now do it here. I did by accident, I shot like 2,200 rounds in like 45 minutes
Yep.
because I wasn't reloading. I wasn't stopping. There was no recoil. Like I did so much learning. And then what I started to do is say, well, designated target being a 14 round drill, I want to start doing, I called it triple designated. So I would
Yeah.
just change the array every single time. So I do a designated target after the 14th round, do a
Mhm.
reload, do it a different way, do a reload, do it a different way. It was 42 rounds. So
Yeah.
it's like, man, that's a lot of rounds. That's a lot of concentrating. That's a lot of me making sure my eyes are driving around. And that's now how I practice a lot at the range. I'll go to the range. I set up 5 random targets, 4 random targets. I decide on an order to shoot them in, and I shoot them in. So this ace is giving me the ability to, it just dumped 4 inches of ice on us. So it's giving me the ability to do exactly what I do in the range to the tune of 2,200 rounds. Like
Yep.
that's insane to me. It's I didn't even clock that I was shooting that much.
So a couple good things. I'll talk about one thing and then I'll talk about how I use it also to supplement kind of what you're saying. Um, people talk about deliberate practice,
Yes.
right? You've heard it in a bunch of different books. Deliberate practice is the way that to mastery, blah, blah, blah. Right. So in a book by Adam Grant called Hidden Potential, he talked about a different concept called deliberate play. Right. So the idea is you're deliberately working on something, but it feels like a game. It feels like a challenge. And you get immersed in this shit and you are like in it until you're done. Like no phone, no distractions, like you are in it until you're done. And that is an important component. A lot of people say they dry fire for an hour a day, but they don't.
Yes. They're
Right?
doing a
They,
lot of
they yeah,
editing
maybe
and
20 minutes. They check their phone a little bit. Oh, they take one of the. They take 5 videos and they post one of them on Instagram. Just hey, I did my work for today. Tag a couple people. Right? So this is uninterrupted, focused, fun
mm-hmm.
play and training. Like if you use it correctly. So like the way that I do it, a little different than Sam. So I have a book and I record. I do the series. So series are 4 or 5 stages in a row, and it's similar to a match. You got to perform well in all of them to do well on the leaderboard. I record the first score of every series that I do. Treat it like give it all the intentionality that I possibly can,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I'll work on it for a couple of repetitions. Usually it could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 7. It depends on what I'm gaining out of it. If I'm gaining like
Yeah. Don't stop.
knowledge,
Yeah.
I won't stop at that point. But if I feel that I'm starting to just like I'm just over try, like I'm starting to over try or it's starting to get junky, like I'll stop. But so I'll record the first and the best. And the goal for me is, and this is so there's a training effect for everybody, right? You train enough times on something, you're gonna gain some sort of growth, right?
Mhm.
My goal is to have that growth be 5% or less as a goal, and between 5 and 10% typically. And along the lines of that, so I write first best, right? And along the lines of that, the trend over time is that everything is progressing upward,
Yes.
right? And then it becomes, so if I can get above 10% higher than my first score,
Mhm.
it is that I had to work really hard to get it,
Mhm.
like
I like
really
that.
hard.
I like
So
that.
it shows you that things are progressing upward, and you're
Yeah.
like today, right? I did one of the things. I had my best, and I'll write this down. So when I have a best first run or a PR, I'll write it down as a win. Like, hey,
That's
this
awesome.
is
Yes.
this is a victory. Like I look through my notes. Okay, this is the best first run I've done. Right? Like today, my I was within 5% of the first series that I did, and I was like, and it was the best first run, and I was like, yeah, like that feel
Yeah,
that
that's
that's good.
huge. Yeah.
And
And
then
now
for me,
acknowledging that you get a chance to do that instead of you doing your best run in dry fire, not getting a score, thinking it was good, but like you don't get a chance to bury that positivity. You don't get a chance to like burn that good image, that good ego in your brain because
yes,
you're just warming up. You think, but now I think that's an extra valuable positive burn. You're like, wow, I can step up and do my best even the first time.
the
If you
first the
can't,
first time, and at this point now, I got to work my fucking ass off in order to get like a high score on a series and get that much further out of
yeah.
it. Like it's so much harder to do at this point.
Yeah, so
And
you're
then
learning how to come out and be a cold shooter, and I like that method of training because something I'll do is very similar. Is say, all right, this is what I would do match mode. This is how I would shoot it. How can I squeeze juice out of this? And like now I'll start gaming it. Now for the purpose of then kind of doing what you're doing, saying, all
why
right,
not?
well I shot at 12 hit factor comfortably. At 15 hit factor, I maxed it out, and then my goal is to in between there go why like what do I need to train in there? What is the actual thing that's going to lead me to getting these higher scores? And you could start to look at, well, it wasn't a faster first shot. None of
Yeah,
those splits were measurably faster. It's that I added another target while I was waiting for a swinger. I might have whatever. I just started getting my processing speed down. Whatever it was, like you start to realize, oh, there is a very specific, maybe singular, maybe two or three things that are
mhm,
stopping me from my cold run being my best run. And then you could start to work on those individually. You could take them and work them individually in this. You could pick a stage that will work those skills. You could go to the Ranger. You could just pick a three target array out of an entire stage and hammer those skills and
mhm.
not worry about the score. But that's huge. I think that's a great way to start to do is like I like that first versus best runs. That's a great
Yep.
way to train.
Well, and it reflects the what we say when it comes to shooting. A guy who's a higher level shooter is going to bring more of his best on the first run. He will probably get a better run if you let him continue to do it. But the thing is, it's not going to be so far outside of the first run,
Yes.
and that's an important distinction to make.
And I think
Um,
in real life, something that you'll start to see, and you probably see the same thing. I'm weird because I have that weekly match. So I shoot like a lot of my
yep.
training is just in weird match formats. And then in that, because I'm coaching during the match, I'm not doing my mental, I'm not ignoring other people, I'm not getting reps. A lot of times it's like, oh, I'm up. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'll go. Right. And I'll run a stage and it'll be a 10 hit factor, whatever. And then I always get a chance or give my students a chance to run it again.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I'm going to try to run it again. And I always call it the curse of the first. I
Yeah.
can put down by accident subconsciously because I wasn't worried about anything, the best first
Yeah.
run in real life. And then if I try to beat it, generally doesn't go great. And if I do beat it, it's by nothing. It's by point four, like it's nothing. And it's interesting because you're like, oh, okay, cool. That's what grandmasters want. That means I'm
Yeah.
training for consistent high puking of my skills. I'm just vomiting my skills out there. It's not any effort, right? It's just, oh,
It's
there you go.
Yep. I've noticed a lot of that too, and it's funny to see that, and like you are busting your ass to get that little bit more, you
Yep.
know.
And which is
So
funny because I know you do the same training I do. Instead of running the same way 15 times, that's why I'll run it my best. I'll see if I can beat it, and then I'll just run it a different way because there's not a lot of value anyway in sitting there and beating the same thing over and over again. It's can I
no,
be
for
consistent?
skill development, yes. For well, and you could also, so like a good thing, I mean, even from a training standpoint, like you can still work on the skill while demanding that you execute a certain way. So
Yes.
like you can pick, so like a thing that I'll do is I'll have two positions. I'll start in the middle, I'll shoot a target, and then I'll shoot some stuff on the other side. and I'll demand that the my entry time on a
Yes.
10-yard open target through a vision barrier and my split time position to position on a 20-yard popper is the same, right? So
I like
that's
that.
still
Yeah.
that reinforces that's working the skill, but that's using different targets while commanding yourself, or like in you the way you say it is I will,
No, I
right?
like that because it's like that goes right into like I call it the progressions. It's like, hey, I worked
Yep.
on the hard skill. Now instead of just running to a stage or a match, you're just going to set it up as a little array. Where the array or the drill is now focused off of the hard skills. Like you built a drill that basically is testing the hard skills in multiple ways, but bang. Now I like that because this is where you could start to get creative in this whole ACE system and start to do it the same way, even though there's 3 inches of ice outside. Or, I mean, I got a baby at home, so I'm not able to, like, as much as I have a range to play with, like, when I'm babysitting, quote unquote, a lot of times I sit him in the little scoot that he could run around my feet. And
Yep.
I'm just dry firing while I have a little baby screaming at me, basically. It's like,
And
yeah, it's awesome. I can't do that any other way. I also don't feel comfortable dry firing around my toddler because I'm not
sure.
flagging him. Like,
Yeah.
now I'm using a friggin' controller, or a white and orange controller. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, so and another thing that ACE will give you that typical dry fire won't is gives you accountability. It gives you the visual part of recoil, which you can use to call shots like you would
Yes.
normally. And they give you the split times on everything. So
Yes.
like you were talking about drills, right? So after I'm done with the series, I'll typically grab some drills and I'll typically do some drills that I want to focus on. Movement focus, I like to do a little bit because I have a little bit of space to move. And then what you find out is that you're going through a stage. Okay, I'm here. How do I get here? And you look at it and you look at the metrics and you're like, okay, I want to make that thing, that keystone,
Bingo.
this. So
Yes.
like for me, the don't miss is the name of it, where it has the four plates and whatever. So
Yes.
I identified I shoot the big popper and then I shoot the two paper and then I go through the little plates and then I'll come if when I do it right, I have enough time to hit both swingers and then finish on the left side. So I identified that keystone as the transition from the popper to the far targets needs to be under half second. So I am going to commit to this is going to be a half second or under, right? I'm just going to call shots. If I need to make up, I need to make up, but I'm going to commit to that time.
Mhm.
And as a result, I'm like, man, that one thing, and you're able to check it every time. I look, okay,
Yep.
yes, that's what I want. Okay, yes, that's what I want. Hey, I fired a makeup shot there, but it was what I wanted. And then all of a sudden, like the whole
It's
stage
easy.
opens up. And
Mhm.
I'm like, man, I have so much more time now.
That's a
You can
great
identify
example.
those moments.
I know exactly the one you're talking about. Like the
Yep.
popper, there's two swingers behind a wall, and then there's some far array. So I
Yep.
played the exact same game where I actually, to a very similar degree, I just worked popper to paper, popper to paper. I didn't even finish the rest of the stage. I
Smart.
knew the rest of the stage wasn't where the meat and potatoes were. How much more am I going to squeeze a no miss, one for one transition at a steal, steal, steal? Like, come
Yep.
on.
Yep.
It's all in, can I combo another paper in? So I did exactly what you're talking about. I started the swinger and then I said swinger, swinger. I'm like, all right, so I need to be able to do this. And then I realized, well, I'm actually waiting on this first swinger. What if I just shoot another piece of paper, swinger, swinger?
Yep.
It was almost impossible the first time I did it, but I hit the time metric. So, like that Steve Anderson, I did the
Yep.
speed mode. I
With
could physically
accountability.
do it. Yeah, I could physically do it. And the shots weren't crazy. It
Yeah.
might have been a Delta mic or a Charlie Delta, So I'm like,
As
oh,
long as you're aware.
oh wow, I didn't know I can get away with that. Because in
Yeah.
dry fire, it felt like a guess. In live fire, that's a lot of weird. It's hard
It's
to get,
also a lot of ammo to figure that out.
and it's hard to be that confident just whipping bullets that fast.
Mhm.
So now I'm like, oh wow, I could get away with that. And now same thing. I went to the range and I tested this same kind of theory. Can I put a couple more papers before I come back to the swinger? Didn't feel like a problem anymore. And then I
Yep.
went and ran the rest of the stage. And yeah, it becomes interesting to start to like hold yourself accountable to that single metric and then make the rest of it easy almost. You're like, if I get this, yeah, boom.
It gives you the idea that this is an important component of the stage, whatever it is, and it's in all the stages in all ways because you have the opportunity. Well, again, for one, you get accountability. Two, you get timestamps on everything, and three, you see a leaderboard,
Mm-hmm.
right? Seeing the leaderboard gives you this. It's objective curiosity.
Yes.
This person, and maybe you don't like the person. I mean, who knows about that? But like, I need to beat this person, right? Let's But objective curiosity. How did they do that? How did they do that? Like, and you're like, man, how do I get there? And then you just start trying stuff. And isn't that what training is?
Yeah, because that's the
Isn't that
thing.
what
I feel like a
effective
lot of
training is?
people are very complacent. And when I dry fire, this is what I do. And I'm like, well, why don't you change that? Why are you doing that? And they don't really have an answer. And you've said it, we've said it. If it's that or nothing, do that, please.
Yeah,
Always, please
great.
train. But at least you can start to use fun and do this. And you said something funny, the unstructured, like the play side of things.
Yeah.
I was always an athlete. So I view this as like all athleticism stuff. The reason I could race dirt bikes is because we just played on dirt bikes my whole life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I didn't practice. I had a lot of fun and did nothing but push the limits on a dirt bike. And did you pick up? It was the '90s, so you couldn't pick up a phone, but like you were undistracted. You know what I mean? Same thing with like we got into lacrosse. Like the reason we were really the better we got at lacrosse was when we played games off season with each other all year round. The best I ever was at hockey wasn't when I was playing hockey seriously. It's when we every Tuesday would meet up under the lights and all like start to game with each other, and then you got like a flow with the same kind of guys. So it's the same thing here. It's like it's structured play, for lack of better words, but humans are competitive. We by nature want to learn. By nature, you do learn. Like it's just monkey see, monkey do. We are just meat bags. Like we're smarter than your average meat bag, but we're just meat bags. Like we are humans still. We're just monkeys. But I think one of the big things that you mentioned that I love to talk about are the series.
Yeah.
So those
I love
series
it.
are. I love how Rob described it because it's like, hey, I'm going to shoot the series, and to have a high score in a series, it's not going to be push one stage and fall apart on the rest. Now,
No, you generally end up in maybe, if you're doing at the top of the series, maybe in the top 10 on most of those stages, top 10, even top 20 sometimes. Like it's
so
not it's not about it's not about maxing out the score every time. Sometimes that might happen, but usually it doesn't. It falls somewhere for me, I usually see anywhere top 10, maybe top 20 depending on the stage.
yeah. And I like that too, because what you start to do is it's twofold. First of all, I think it's like more like match training rather
Mhm,
than skill training,
mhm.
which is good. You could do both with the same system. I think that's cool. But now you can take your skills, bring them to the match, make sure that I could do them consistently all the time in any arbitrary order that I am thrown at them, right? And you can monitor your metrics along the way, which by the way, at a match, you can't grab the timer from a RO and be like, and it's not recorded either. So like it is an extra level.
Oh
But
yeah.
what I do, I like something that it taught me is what you're saying is the consistency side of things. Does Eric Graffel need to win every stage at the US Open? Did he win
I think
most
he
of them
won
even?
one.
Yeah, he won one of
One.
30 and he
Yeah.
crushed everybody. Now the same thing happened at Nationals where he stomped everybody, all of us into the dirt. He won like 2 of the 18 stages, but every single stage finish was top 10, if not top 5. He
Yeah.
never made a mistake the whole time. Everybody else was variable. If you look at it, like the reason he was not the winner the whole time, it's because Eric did his exact job and everybody else skewed the numbers around him. So
Yep.
you start to like build this mental fortitude that I don't need to chase wins or overalls on stages. I need to maximize my abilities on
Performance.
every stage, minimize mistakes, minimize makeups, and never shoot a Delta or a Mike at a Nationals and win. Like that's how he
Yeah.
won.
Well, like it goes down to this, right? Run your process. For one, figure out what your best process is to get your best performance,
Mhm.
and then run that process, right? Eric's hit factor strategy is impeccable when it comes to that, and he follows those rules to a T every time because he knows when he follows those rules, he is going to do well.
And I
He's
like
he's
it because it's just mathematical, unemotional. Make decisions. That's what I'm going to do because I decided to do it because the math proves it. Like that's why I'm ripping off a lot of my system from Eric. Like that's just because I want to emulate one of the greats. Like it works. It works damn well. It's unemotional. It's mathematically proven over very very long times to work. And man, does that guy shoot a lot of rounds to be able to prove it too. Like
Of course, I mean, but quite honestly, yes, is it maybe work for him? But quite honestly, it's essentially play. Like it's ace for real.
yeah, he has the ability at that
Right?
EG center that he's
Yeah,
got. Like, yeah, he's just playing ace for real. He's going to shoot the stage as many times as he wants and in many
right.
different orders because he
Yep.
doesn't have a real round count like the rest of us. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. Like we all wish we could do that. So
Yeah.
the way I look at it is that's why I have ace. I have ace because in the corner of the cabin there, in the corner of the hut, I have like 7 barrels. I'm up to like 110,000 rounds now. So like looking
Yep.
at that in money and that is like, oh, cool.
$55,000 or
So I
whatever.
can afford to be Eric then. I can be Eric. There are no excuses anymore. I could put in as much time scoring and all this stuff as Eric does. Because well, I'm being facetious when I say that because people love excuses. Like, Eric could have 10,000 rounds a year. He'd still stomp everybody. That's not
Yeah.
the thing. But hey, let's remove all the excuses so people train more, Like, let's take more excuses away, give more opportunity. And yeah, if you want to train like Eric, there's a bunch of the CZ stages. Like you could train his name's on the leaderboard. You can chase JJ. You could chase him down. It's a good time to start to see. And Eric is a great example on Ace. I always see Eric in the top 20,
Yeah.
but I never see him sitting in the top of the leaderboard because he doesn't game the stages. And the number one guy at the top of the leaderboard always has gamed the stages, unless you like they just reset the scores. But if you give it 3 days, somebody's going to game it out. Somebody's going to lean through a wall. Somebody's going to use a computer program and ruin it. But every time, no matter what, Eric, JJ, you, me,
Yep.
Sean Griffith,
We're at the top.
Graybeard, yeah, they're all in the top 20 every single time. So
I mean, and don't get me wrong, like there are times where we'll get top. Like,
yeah,
you work on,
I like
especially if
it.
you're working on stuff. Like you said, you're working on the
Yes,
exercise and you're working on the right metrics.
yes,
Like you'll get that top. But
yeah,
typically speaking, you'll know, and you'll know the same thing. It'll be like, all right, I'm here. I know that this is like a really good performance for me. Me continuing to chase is not going to be beneficial.
yeah,
Let me move on to the
yes.
next thing that's going to be more effective
Yeah, like
training.
the energy in winning the leaderboard is not worth the energy in training. So let me find
Right.
another stage and put this energy into training. And like, yeah, you can chase leaderboards. Don't get me wrong. And I have done it in the vein of like I let me say it like this. I don't like a lot of the stationary, like the bill drills and stuff like that. Because
Yeah, I don't do those.
I don't find they're useful in this regard. The one time I've used them is to adjust the grip to see how fast I can pull a damn trigger while
Yep.
clamping the other gun down. All right, cool, done. But in pursuing that, I was 85th on the leaderboard. Do I give a shit? No, I don't give a shit. It's like whatever, man. But
No,
I think the stages is where you can't get lucky, and you'll start to see, especially in the series, the guys winning the series are always the same 5 of us
yeah,
because you can't get lucky 5 times in a row. So it's always the same 5, 10 dudes that are always at the top of the series. So I think it's cool because I find I've said this a bunch of times. The difference between an A-class shooter and a grandmaster is not skill but consistency.
yeah,
The ability to operate at 95% every stage, not operate at GM levels 75% of the stages.
yeah.
So yeah, you start to see it come out, and I love that kind of training. I really do. I think it's cool to start to see the consistency side of things. Shut your brain up when you see I'm ninth on the leaderboard for this one stage. It doesn't matter. We have 5 more stages to go. Like
Yeah.
you could start to be like, well, if I keep doing my job, he could mess up, and that's what you should be doing at matches anyway, right? Like you're just saying, I'm going to keep maximizing my performance. I can't do anything but hope that I have more consistency.
It also gives you an opportunity if you have one that doesn't go your way to recover mentally and
Yes,
physically, like to
and
recover from that and actually practice that recovery technique because
yeah,
that recover, especially on the first one, because the first one's the one that matters the most, right?
yeah,
Be able to practice the opportunity to, hey, I can recover from this one.
yes,
Okay, let's make sure we refocus and do the thing.
yeah,
So that first score is always very very useful. And then for me at the end of the session, I'll write, okay, what can I do better for next time?
yeah.
Just pick like one thing.
Yeah. I
What
like that. The low hanging fruit effect. Just like,
simple,
hey, what's the lowest hanging fruit here that's going to make a big difference instead of worrying about all of it or nothing? Like
right?
it's very simple.
A little better every day goes a long way. Like
That's
that's
it.
what I say.
Yeah.
That
And
all
that's why
rhymes.
I
That
think
all
that's why
rhymes.
that's why I do like this thing so much. It's hanging over there charging. I don't have to put a belt on. I can throw it on. There's a calendar. There's a round count. There's a lot of that where you should be doing that anyway. But that like, it's just like having, I know a lot of people have that like Duolingo app where like that owl reminds you that you didn't shoot today. When
Yeah,
I see somebody signed on to VR, I'm like, all right. Like it's that little psychological push to train. And I think it's like, it can only be a good thing. If you were training less or more, it's always going to be a good thing.
it's gonna help, and just the visual and the information processing side of things, like you don't realize like this is the tool that you
Yeah.
will get tremendous gains training with.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. That's
visually,
basically the
holy
summary is like
cow.
you said it earlier is like if you are up to an A class level gun handling, right? Once you are into that master A class level of gun handling, the speed doesn't increase to get to grandmaster. It's that you could do it every time, all the time,
Yeah.
everywhere. So you can start to say, like, yeah, once I hit there, the bigger tool to work on is visual processing, mental processing. And you start to realize, well, then there's a tool that exists for all of the other skills except for visual and mental until now, until this
Yeah.
ace thing, until I could put goggles on my head and literally like a cyborg program my brain to visually process. And the mental processing thing we were just talking about, like in the series, I have to have a process that works every single time. I need to be able to step up to a stage, program it, execute it, forget it, program, execute, forget it, program, execute, forget it. So you're working on the mental, the processing, the visual side of things. You're working on emotions because if you screw up like in a series, yeah, just maximize the rest of the series. Don't blow the whole day. You know what I mean? Like that's the way I look at it. You could drop a stage and not ruin your whole day. You're not going to win, but you can still podium. You
You
know,
want to make you want to
that's
make it more fun. Record yourself doing
yeah.
the series like that. That makes it more uncomfortable.
I like it. A little
You know.
blinking red light that you're like,
Yeah,
oh, you
like
know,
it's
it's
literally
there.
in, it's like I'm watching you right now.
And I think you know what? I even forgot to write this down and I forgot to mention this. I am a weird guy. I'm always doing stuff at weird times, but I know a lot of people sign on and they dry fire together now with other people.
Yeah, I've heard.
You have you and two other, they look like the we people all standing around with guns. So like I'm watching you dry fire, you're watching me dry fire, I'm talking shit. We're sitting there in the range together like you normally would. So what
Yeah,
would be a once a month, if you're lucky, occurrence can now be a once a week occurrence, maybe a daily occurrence if you got a
yeah,
good buddy, and you could actually start to have that like real accountability, that real getting nervous, record it if you think you're doing well.
yeah,
All right, live stream it if you think you're doing well. Invite people into your room, and now let's see if you keep doing well. And you could keep increasing this
yeah.
until I don't really care what's going on behind me. I don't care if the guy from Shooting USA comes with a camera. I don't care. I'm just going to always shoot my same game. I don't care if I'm at nationals or at home.
That's actually how I got over that discomfort of other people watching or recording.
Live
Like when
stream,
I didn't have control of it, is I would do Instagram back then. That was back then. I would do Instagram live once a
yeah,
week and just train.
yeah,
Train because not all training is perfect, right? So learning, actually, quite honestly, it actually focused me even more. I remember hitting a very, very high level of intentionality and focus. I don't think I missed a reload the first time I did it at all, and I was like, wow, like that was awesome. But
because it feels like pressure. It's not any
because
sloppy reps
it is
anymore. Yeah.
pressure, being listen, like I'm one of the fastest reloaders in the world,
Yes.
right? And I'm here I am dry firing where like in my like in the room, like where I'm doing a lot of repetitions with reloads, like shit can go wrong and it's not always perfect, as we know. So it was like, oh, but that's how I got past it. So like you guys can use this kind of opportunity to think of ways to help put some pressure on you so that you can learn to perform better.
Yeah. Yeah. I always joke one of the biggest pressures is not nationals or major stages anymore. It's when I've been hyping up a drill to this 12 group of people who are learning from me. And now I got to
Oh,
shoot the drill clean. Like I try to play it off. I bet none of them know how nervous I am because that's the job. But
it's
like I
uncomfortable,
actually am
man.
just as nervous for that as I am my first stage at nationals. It is. It's funny.
Yeah.
So
It's
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 good.
almost more uncomfortable in a sense,
Yeah. So now perform in front of your friends, invite people to watch you. You could it's a good thing. So we could sit here and talk like we're both pretty nerdy. I always mean that in a positive way. We both love the nerd side of all this kind of stuff, the training
Compliment, my
side of
man.
things, because like the process is the way forward. Like
Mhm.
Joey Sauerland's a great example of that. Like there's a lot of these guys who are like very process oriented that get a lot of success. Jay from New Hampshire, right? Like
Hey, Beal, yep.
yeah, Jay Beal, like insanely focused on just the process, and it just works for him. So they all have their own processes. This is just part of my process now. This is what works for me, and I
Same.
found that it keeps me training, especially in these bad months.
Mhm.
When I hear other GMs like Rob, when I see Tim Herron, when I see JJ, Eric, Sean Griffith, guys that when I see them at nationals, they're my competition,
Yeah.
or I'm worried about them being there. So if they're training it, why would I think I'm better than that? Like I think it's a cool tool now. I think it's accessible. Now the meta is becoming cheaper and easier to use. That's something you said you started on a 2, right?
So I started on a 2, and I upgraded to a 3. So
Yeah.
for anybody listening to this, there's the 2, the 3S, and the 3. Really, unless you have the 2, you're not gonna buy the 2. You're probably gonna look at the 3S or
One
the
of the 3.
3. My opinion on that is if you're really investing in a serious training tool and you have the ability to afford the 3 is the better option, and it's largely because of the resolution and the lenses.
So
The
it's
le-
funny. I didn't know better. I'm just like I said. I had an Xbox 360, and now I have a Meta. So like
yeah.
I just was in Target. I was like nifty. That one down below, the cheapest one. Didn't. It's not always the best option, but I shoot Glocks. So I got the 3S, not knowing better because 3S. I thought 3S was better. Like I'm just
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah,
know
it's
any
the newer
better.
model. Yeah.
It works. It's great. If you're gonna buy it or not buy it based on that $200 savings, get the 3S. It runs it great. Don't get a 2. They're choppy. I'll say that. The 3S is fine, but Rob is right. The resolution, the picture, the frame rate, it feels a lot better in a 3. I've only played it through a 3 once. I have a 3S. If you're gonna do it, do it. It's not worth saving $100 to get frustrated and want to take it off because I've wanted to do that before.
The
Yeah.
sweet spot on the 3, like the lenses, the way they're designed, they have a better sweet spot. So further targets are also they remain clear for longer. With
See,
the other lenses, they're a little shaped weird. So when you're leaning, sometimes they get a little blurry.
even right in the center of the screen, like a 20, 25-yard target, it's not in focus. And I don't have bad eyes. I have fine eyes. So I'm like,
Yeah.
it's the 3. There's a pretty big difference in there.
No, there's a
Now,
noticeable difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
like don't let that stop you from, if you have a budget issue, don't let it stop you. It doesn't matter. You're going to get 99.9% of the training out of it. But especially if you're going to buy I will say this, 'cause I played Batman on it because it came with it. Played it one time.
Yeah, me
If
too.
you are going to play video games on it, if you're going to do anything else with it, yeah, get the bigger one anyway. You might as well. It's
Yeah.
one of those. And if you're going to have multiple accounts on it, because there's some people who like their kids are going to play on it, that's when data and stuff start. Get the 3. Just get a 3 and a huge gigabyte. I have the bare minimum that you could use on it. The 3S with like 128 gigabyte.
Yeah.
I think that's the
Ace plays
smallest.
fine on all that.
So that's the bare minimum
I
thing you
had
could
that's
do.
the yeah, that's I mean, for me, I don't like when I was using the 2, it was just fine.
Now
Like
we
I
also
didn't feel
mentioned
like I didn't feel like I was losing out, but
yes.
I was going to pick a I saw that they were on sale, and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna make a serious investment into this."
Mhm.
And for me, like, for us, again, it's a business expense, so we write it off
Yeah. Yeah, had I
I
known, I
put
would have
the
gotten
nice
a
one.
3, don't get me wrong. And I also tell everybody, you could get the Ace subscription right now, get a Meta, start playing with the controller, because we've talked about this. I have my own theories on
You've
this.
done it.
Once
Yeah,
I
I
find
haven't.
the dot, shooting is the same. And if you hold the controller in such a way that you could still use the trigger, it's 90% of the same. There's the guy Drew Maruski that's setting all those records. He's one of the better shooters on Ace who's just using a controller.
Yep.
So it's a possibility. There's no real excuse to not get into the whole system, even in budgetarily at this point, because for the cost of a case of ammo, you could shoot 20 cases of ammo this month. Like
Yep.
it's not even an argument to me without even getting the gun and the FCU. But what I did was get their normal the controller that comes with them, the Arctis, I think it's called. It
Yep.
looks like a 320.
Yep.
I had a buddy of mine 3D print a Glock. I dropped the FCU in a Glock, but even there, it's like just because I'm a hardcore Glock shooter, even there, it doesn't matter. If you don't have access to a 3D printer and you can just put your hands on a gun or a controller, you're going to get 90% of the stuff we're talking about. It's
Mhm.
just fact of the matter. I don't practice the reload portion and all the other stuff in it because I do it separately as like real dry fire. I do 90% of my draws and everything in real dry fire. I mentioned there's times I'll draw on this, but yeah, this
Yeah.
thing has just become like that's the setup is like just get yourself a 3S and get rocking. If when you fall in love with it, you'll get the rest of it. That's kind of it's like everything. It's just get it when you feel like it. You will, trust me. But get it when you feel like it.
And if you guys have questions on how to use it too, like feel free to reach out to either one of us.
Yeah, so that's the way I wanted to wrap this up here. Is Rob has an awesome online community going. So if you want to join Rob's online the Accelerator community, he loves talking about this. He does calls on Zoom where you can ask him his questions and everything, bounce it off. He has a lot of students that also use it too. I'm the same way with it. I train a lot of people with it now. I've actually been doing privates with mine. I've been calling it mixed reality, where since it's so cold, we'll do some indoor work. We'll do some dry fire. I have some pretty cool sim guns at my range where we'll do some indoor shooting, even at some targets.
It's
But
awesome.
like it's a training tool now. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns about it, both of us are incredibly accessible for it. I don't even have a code for it. They haven't even, I don't think they know who I am even then I'm talking about it like this. So
No,
I'll
me
say,
neither.
yeah, they have no idea who I am. They've never talked to me about this. I think Tim Herron has a code for it. So if anybody
Tim
wants a code,
does.
go look up Tim Herron and go steal his code, get 10% off. But
I
but yeah,
yeah.
I think everybody should kind of add it to their arsenal. It should be if you're going to be a serious shooter. There's a lot of tricky little things out there. There's a lot of gear you could waste your time and money on. I think for the expense, this ends up increasing your training value and saving you ammo money, really. So it's everybody's got their different opinions on it, but I see a lot of successful shooters using it. I don't think there's any harm in it. That's the way I put it. I think there's only positive value.
There's harm again. There's harm if you don't use it in the right way.
Confirm and use it efficiently. If you
Like
if you
you've
video
like
game it and just
yeah.
learn to video game it, yeah. But if you, yeah, that was a dangerous statement. You're right. If you use our guidance in this podcast and think about using it efficiently, there's no downside in it. If
And
you chase scores like it's Halo,
yeah.
be
And the
prepared
other
for the
thing the other thing is if the further removed you are from having really, really good shooting fundamentals, the more the game recoil is going to appear to be less to you. So that's something you will have to make sure when you do live fire that you focus on getting that really, really well dialed in, because then the more dialed in that is, the more advantageous ACE becomes as a
Yeah,
training tool.
yeah, I like it.
So
Yeah,
awesome, man.
well, hell yeah, man. Well, thank you for chatting me up on that. I know we went a little bit over, but I
I
can
love
never
this
shut up.
stuff, man. You know that.
Yeah, I can never shut up about this kind of
If I
stuff.
didn't have to go to work, I would I would
Oh,
stay
I get it.
talking
I get
longer.
it. Yeah, I'm just hoping the baby. I didn't wake the baby up. So, but all right, man. Well, have a good day at work. Thank you for getting on and chatting with us about it. Again, if you guys want to find Rob, robepifania.net, I believe, right?
Mhm.
Is his website. He's got everything up there, his online course and all that kind of stuff. He's up in the Long Island area. For you guys up in the Northeast-ish area, obviously, you know where to find me. All my stuff's tagged in this. I don't need to bore you guys. So, as I always end every single video. Oh, wait, do you say it? You
No,
got
I was
something?
gonna say, and if anybody listen, this is the second podcast Sam and I have done together, and we don't mind. We like doing these together. So if you guys have more suggestions, feel free to put it out to Sam, and
Yeah, I like
we'll
that.
get
If you
together
guys
and do it for you.
if there's a topic, because ACE is one of those topics that I've had a crazy amount of questions come into all the messages and everything. So yeah, you got any questions about anything concerning both of us, and including we're going to be doing some classes this year. So I know we keep saying going to, and we're getting dates because we both have insane lives right now. But hey, it's coming. It's coming.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. As I say at the end of every one of my videos, as always, don't forget to dry fire. And then I got my look at that. I got my drum.